A lot of our viewers want to know about the restroom.
The
The
restroom,
restroom
yeah.
on board.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they've just the crew two that's up there right now. They had installed and Mark Vandehei as well. He came up on the Soyuz, but that crew, they just have activated a second toilet on the U.S. side of the space station. Yeah, so that's a big deal, right? But you know what? It's interesting that the toilet on board, it is definitely more challenging. You don't realize how much gravity helps until you don't have it. But we do collect the human waste separately. So the stool, the feces is collected separately. It's you basically that goes in a little plastic bag that's inside of a can when you're done. The urine though we collect. There's a hose that's got a funnel on it, and when you turn it on, and it's got a fan that provides some suction as well. And we collect that urine and we recycle it, and so yeah, today's urine becomes tomorrow's coffee. Yeah.
What are your feelings about that?
It's funny because you don't really think about it. The recycling system on board is really, really good, but it's very delicate too, right? So sometimes you have to put extra fluids into it. And so, on the Russian segment, they don't oftentimes aren't utilizing a recycling system. They have their own toilet, and they will collect the urine in a can. And so sometimes we would go down and grab their cans of urine and put it into our recycling system. And I have to admit, that's the first time I really kind of thought about what I was drinking. You don't think about it when it just goes in behind the wall and the magic happens, and then you've got drinking water. But when you're actually kind of seeing what you're putting in there, yeah, it makes you think twice.
All for science.
All for science.
Tell us about the food that you guys have to eat. I mean, are you able to heat it up? How do you heat it up? And tell me what
Yeah.
are some of your favorite space meals?
Yeah, so it's interesting you talk about the food, right? So there's a difference between on the vehicle itself, on Crew Dragon, right? When they launch to the station, and oftentimes it can take you over a day to get to station, right? There's no way to heat up the food on board. You don't have any way to take dehydrated food up and add water to it. And so there you need to pick your foods wisely, right? Things that are going to taste good, not heated. And then there's other things. Once you get to station, now the menu really grows, and so you have I don't know, like over 200 items, I think they say, that you could eat, and these are all the individual portions. And so everything comes individually packaged. So you'll have a package of meatloaf, you'll have a package of dehydrated mashed potatoes, a package of corn, and And so, I mean, it's good, right? You've got a variety. You've got the way to heat it up on board. You've got the way to add the hot water to it. And then we also get to have what we call our bonus food packs, or I call it the bonus food pack, where you can kind of send up some stuff that you like. And so one of the things, I got a bit of a sweet tooth, so I would definitely send up a little bit of candy with mine, but like beef jerkies or granola bars or some of the standard things that you can get down here on Earth, you can also have up there. In fact, one of the things I loved up there was, believe it or not, refried beans. And wow, yeah, I mean, you're saying refried beans, really? But think about it. They're sticky, right? They're pretty good. They've got, a lot of our food doesn't have a lot of salt in it, and the refried beans have, there's probably too much salt in it. But you can take those refried beans, and now you got this tortilla, and you can put the refried beans on there, and it's not going to float away. And then you can add some meat to it and a little sriracha sauce, and now all of a sudden you've got a fantastic burrito up in space. You can lose up to, and this is kind of a generic number, but oftentimes we'll talk about 2.5% of your bone density in a month. And so when you think about a 6-month mission, that's quite a bit of bone density that you could potentially lose if you didn't do anything to help prevent it. But fortunately, NASA and our partners have developed some fantastic ways of countering that. And one of the primary ways is through exercise. We actually have a weightlifting device on board that allows us to do all of the kind of standard lifts that you're used to down here on Earth in terms of squats and deadlifts and bench press. And And when you do that, not only you're keeping your muscles strong, but you're also telling your bones, hey, you guys have to stay strong as well. You can't just get weaker up here. And then we also have a treadmill and we have an exercise bike on board. And so all of that exercise, that's one of the reasons we have 2 hours a day dedicated to exercise. I mean, can you imagine having 2 hours a day dedicated down here on Earth to exercise with your job?
What is it like working out with zero gravity?
Is, down here on Earth, when we're exercising, we tend to sweat and all of that, right? And it tends to fall down on the ground or whatever, right? Well, in space, the sweat just kind of sticks to you more, and you'll get this kind of film of sweat around you, and it'll start to gather in one spot, and you'll get a kind of a blob of sweat, and and then every once in a while it'll go flying off and splattering on the wall, and so around our exercise equipment can get kind of messy as well. So that's why Saturday is cleaning day.
What is it like being in space, taking that first trip and, being out there on the ISS? And then what is
Yeah.
it like coming back?
Yeah, it is like nothing else out there, right? It's hard to describe. When you sit there and you think about floating and you try and describe what floating is like to people, it's hard to register that, right? Because we just don't have any reference for what it's like down here on Earth. People will talk about they'll talk about floating or flying, and yeah, they're kind of like it, but if you turn upside down, the blood still rushes to your head, and so it's a completely new way of living and working in that kind of environment that it takes you a bit to get used to. And looking down at the Earth, you definitely changes your perspective on things. And I think probably the biggest, you asked about coming back to Earth, and I would say for me, one of the biggest impacts is being away from something for so long like that. It really makes you appreciate everything about life down here on Earth. And I mean everything. And so I treasure every moment I have. I treasure every moment I have with my family. I don't complain about the weather. It doesn't matter to me because it is great to have. I mean, you think about it, in space, you don't have weather. It's always 72 degrees and there's no breeze, there's no rain, there's no snow. It's always the same. And so even, it's kind of cold here today in Houston, and yet that's great. It feels good. And so going to space is incredible, but I honestly can say that coming back to Earth is even better.
And what's your thought on the term astronaut? Now that we're seeing a lot of these civilians going to space, in the newsroom, we've had this discussion as well. What do we call them? Because, astronauts, do you consider it only like scientists and people who, are on missions considered astronauts? What are your thoughts?
I'm glad you asked that question. I love getting to talk about this question because I think it's fantastic that more and more people are having the opportunity to go to space. The experience is so incredible that I'm really happy that it's not just limited to the professional astronauts or the government agency astronauts anymore. That other people are getting to experience it. And then when people ask me about what do we call them? Are they an astronaut like you? And I kind of take a different take on it. Probably I sit there and think, what a great problem to have, right? I mean, if we're having to worry about what we're going to call somebody else that has gotten on top of a rocket, has ridden that rocket beyond 60 miles so that they've actually been in space, and then they've come down and returned to Earth. And so if we're having to worry about what we're going to call them, that is fantastic. That is a great problem to have. We're going to sort it out. Whether they're called an astronaut or a private astronaut or some other term, a spacefarer, I don't know. But I just think it's great. And the more and more people that we can get into space is even better.